What was Hitler hoping to gain by collecting artifacts from all around the world as he grew in power?
And what did he discover in Antarctica?
And why did the U.S. bring many of his top scientists to the United States at the end of the war?
Animal mutilations have happened all around the world. Are they cruel jokes, part of a satanic or other religious rituals? Or perhaps the next chapter in discussing and learning about UFOs or UAPs?
If so, why are they happening? What purpose does it serve? As we dig in today, we want you to know and have a little disclaimer that one of these topics in particular is not only mysterious, but also very gruesome. So make sure you don't have any little ears or eyes listening today.
We are so glad you're joining us today. Hi, I'm Pastor Penny Schulz.
And I'm Kristen Scharrenberg. We welcome you to Live Life in the Spirit. So we are in the middle of this really exciting series on aliens, UFOs, UAPs. We covered stargates and portals. So we encourage you highly, if you've missed any of those episodes, to go back. You can find all of our content on our Rumble channel, YouTube, and of course on our website at livelifeinthespirit.com.
Last week, we left off and we gave a little tease as we talked a little bit about Antarctica and maybe what Hitler was doing down in the bottom of our globe.
True.
But we didn't really get into it. Today we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be looking at these mysterious cattle mutilations. There's a lot of stuff out there, but we want to bring it in a little bit on what's going on, the phenomenon, what really is a part of this, and what might be the cause.
Absolutely.
Well, before we dig in with Hitler, there is another very unique group that came about from 1947 in the Roswell incident. That's where we kind of left you off last week. There's some other things we want to kind of go back and touch on with Roswell, and this is a governmental entity that was made up of 12 highly decorated people within the government, and they were called
the Majestic 12. And there's been a lot of speculation about that group over the years, but in 1987, there was actually some documents that were made public that show that there is something to this. There is, in fact, a group of people that were, as Penny said, highly decorated, highly intelligent, sort of
they're in the top tiers
echelon of their departments, and yeah.
As more and more evidence keeps coming out, why do we even bring that up? Because it just solidifies yet again that there really was more to this than just a hoax, because we had top people with, there's thousands and thousands of pages of documents. And this group goes back, in fact, it was members of this group that then were responsible for hiring. We talked about that compartmentalizing, and that's where a lot of this stuff comes into play, because with each group, they each subbed out, so to speak, multiple civilian contractors to do just one aspect of that job. And so everybody's just doing one little aspect, not knowing what the other aspects are, and that's how they keep everything so that
in the dark.
Well,
and it was interesting because the security clearance for everything around the Roswell incident was actually higher than those of like our warheads. That tells you this was not just a weather balloon.
No, or a hoax.
No.
Or anything like that.
And there were a few more encounters around the world that we wanted to touch on, that if you do any research, these are some very well-known encounters. So there's called the Aerial School Encounter, and this one was in Zimbabwe. So this is not just in the United States or North America or whatnot. There were 62 school children who saw UAPs and small alien grays, as they're called. And this is what's fascinating. These small alien grays communicated telepathically with them with some kind of an environmental message, which is interesting. around the world with lots of different UFO sightings. There have been multiple reports of cameras and other electrical equipment malfunctioning and not working when they're around, which is interesting. And that will go along with some of what we find out when we look into the cattle mutilations.
Which makes you, a lot of people say, well, I want evidence. Well, a lot of the evidence that has been done, you can't.
Yeah.
Or it just has disappeared. So most of you know Tucker Carlson. And he had Commander David Flair on. He actually came out on national TV and it was allowed, I guess, to talk about this, that on their radar that they had at this one particular time, there was this little tic-tac thing. And most of us have seen that. That was leached out onto a lot of venues on the radar. And they say it was, at that time, it was a UFO because they didn't know what it was. And they found metal. And they said this metal was nothing from this Earth. It had isotopic ratios, only certain ones that we have here on Earth, and this was out of
what we have.
The interesting thing here is the powers to be are leaching the information out. And why now? They've tried so hard for so long to keep this completely squelched and under the radar.
Right.
And now they're letting the radar be seen. Imagine that. So we know, for those with a discerning spirit, when this stuff happens, you need to dig deeper and go, what is the underlying reason for this?
Right.
Why the allowance, or why
now, and why the information that we get.
Attention peaked, and they just let enough out that it's constantly in your face, but not enough
to really give you the full picture.
Right. So to kind of go back with Roswell, what we looked at last week, that metal that was found that had this memory, you could crunch it, you could do whatever, and it would just pop back out. Why we bring this up is because it was this metal that was basically resistant to any heat.
Right.
And the makeup of that structure, it was found by Mac Brazel, who was a rancher. Found this debris. The government took it. We said they had all these scientists back there. And interestingly enough, all of a sudden, bakelite came about, which was the very first plastic materials to be introduced to the world, and was popular because it could be molded into any shape and is totally heat resistant.
So you have to wonder if we didn't gain some technology from what was found. And there's been a lot of advances in technology over the last several decades that could be credited to some of what we're finding.
There was a huge boom right after Roswell with stuff. You're talking, we've gone thousands and thousands of years with stones and twigs. And then just, you get the metal, gunpowder. That was basically about it. And then just all of a sudden, everything now is space age technology.
There might be something to that.
This plastic that we've talked about, though, it's only about the thickness and it's the color of a photograph record. But it's not a photograph record. For those of you who are younger than all us, you probably have no clue what an album is. But back then, before they had MP3s, before CDs, before 8-tracks, before cassettes, they had what was called a record. And that's about what it kind of was like. It has been used as heat shielding material for electronics, which is kind of unusual that, again, this just popped up out of nowhere.
From a left balloon.
Now, why would we bring up Hitler? And this whole mishmash of interesting materials and unidentified objects that now we're getting years and decades later are being exposed. There is one other common denominator, and it is a little different maybe than what the spin was. In fact, I would say so much that Indiana Jones, the whole series of that, they've done probably the best job of leaking out probably what was going on than anyone
absolutely
on real TV
has ever done. What not everybody knows is that Hitler was very interested and invested in the occult, and superstitious to the point of really believing that there were talismans and artifacts that had powers beyond this earth. And so he actually sent people all over the world to find these ancient artifacts that he felt were sort of imbued with power. If you ever watched Warehouse 13, their job was to go all over the world and gather these artifacts that were causing problems because they had some sort of power. So I'm telling you, Hollywood, it tells us all the stories. So in December of 1938, so this is as he's still rising to power, he sent Schwabenland, which was the name of a ship, on a secret mission to Antarctica, of all places. And he included a lot of scientists and members of this Thule Society, which was a German occult society. They were heavily rooted in racism, of course, especially against the Jewish people.
Now, he went to Antarctica because there was something special there that he was looking for. But why was he looking for it? Because he wanted global domination. The only way to win, he needed to have more power than he possessed. And he knew the only way he could do that if he sought out additional resources than what he already had. So he believed in the existence of an advanced species buried deep inside the earth called the Arians. Now, if you were like me, I mean, I grew up, of course, way after any of this, but I remember my parents, of course, they didn't grow up then either, but this has been a story all along, that Hitler was going for the Aryan race, the perfect race. Now, we were always told that he was trying to create that, meaning it was the blonde hair, blue-eyed, that all these experiments he was doing, he was trying to create this whole new German army. That is not it at all. And it didn't make any sense because he was dark-haired, brown-eyed, dark mustache.
Right.
Most of the Germans were.
Right.
He was after something so much more nefarious that people just don't even want to go there. There are many experts that will actually talk about this.
Right.
But for the most part, this is considered, I guess, too fringe, but is it?
It really goes along with all of the other things that we've been talking about, really. And so it's believed that he made contact with this group of people in Antarctica. Now, much of the continent was mapped out, and they set up base 211, and there was something odd there. An Arctic oasis. There's actually a geothermal area of water underneath that allows vegetation, warm water, even a huge forest in Antarctica.
Under Antarctica. And it's not just Hitler who witnessed this.
No.
Admiral Byrd actually had several expeditions to Antarctica before. The first trip was in 1928 and then 1933 to 34. The first two he paid for by himself, but then there became Operation High Jump. In 1946 to 1947 was the first to be paid for by the U.S. government. The U.S. trying to test and find answers to see how to better, this was the story.
Right.
Was that the U.S. was trying to test and find better answers to see how our equipment would do in winter conditions, how planes would fly at colder temperatures at the altitude, and ships.
How to better winterize all of our equipment and our soldiers and all of that good stuff.
So this was the government's explanation. Now the problem was that people questioned this because he went with 14 ships, 33 aircraft, and 4,700 men fully armed, 2 destroyer tankers, and 2 heavily armed seaplanes, and an attack submarine, all fully stocked with the best arms in the Navy.
Absolutely seems like what you would take on a on a mission to figure out how to better winterize our stuff.
Yeah, you would not. Well, Admiral Byrd was giving a live radio broadcast
while he was flying over Antarctica.
And as he started explaining what he was seeing, now, here's the thing. America knew that Hitler had been
down there.
They knew that he was looking for something. We were not the only ones there, neither was Hitler. There were multiple countries that were going to Antarctica to try to find something. Why would you go to Antarctica, right? As Admiral Byrd was relaying what he was seeing, it got really crazy, and he was cut off for 3 hours because this went direct transmission to the radio that everybody could hear. They cut him off for 3 hours.
And then they lost contact with him during that time. He couldn't, they were trying to reach him, they couldn't find him. He was just gone.
In his journal, though, that was found later after he died, they actually learned what happened for those 3 hours.
And what he wrote, well,
it sounds a little incredible. However, it matches with the stuff from Hitler.
It does. So he said while they were flying, they discovered this Arctic oasis. And he said all of a sudden the instruments were spinning, and he could not explain how there was warmth and green, fleshy vegetation. All of a sudden he couldn't find the sun. And the light just seemed different there. He said they saw what looked like a mammoth, and he was trying to radio in what he was seeing, but all of a sudden he couldn't.
He also said he saw what seemed like there to be a city. And all of a sudden there were these disc-like flying objects. Now this is 1946. On the other side with a swastika on them. I'll let that soak in for just a minute. The aircraft suddenly felt light. Then a voice came through their radio in the Nordic or Germanic accent, speaking English, and said they would help them land the plane, not to worry. They were in good hands.
That would be worrisome.
That would be the first tractor beam.
It would. Engines on the plane stopped working, and the plane began to fly itself. Several men approached the plane. They were tall, with blonde hair, and the city in the distance seemed to pulse with rainbow hues of color. It was like nothing he'd never seen.
He said he didn't see any signs of weapons. Someone called him by name and asked him to open the cargo door, which he did.
So he was, at that point in time, he was taken into the city where the buildings were made of a crystal-like substance on a conveyor belt type thing to a building to meet the master, a man with delicate features and the etching of years on his face. And the master told him he was allowed to come in because he was of noble character and well known on the surface Earth, and that he was in the realm of the Arians.
He said they were concerned about nuclear war on the surface and that they had sent their ships to check out the nuclear options. Many sightings of UFOs around the nuclear power plants, etc. during this time had popped up.
And many of them just stopped working after those UFOs had been seen.
They told him that they had to intervene because humans were messing with too much that they couldn't handle. And they were reaching a point of no return. So we're going to have to put humanity back and would come back later to help us advance. All right, so when you see all this and you hear that, it sounds so far-fetched. Yet this was a very, very credible military general.
Right.
That sounds like
the Wizard of Oz?
Yeah,
like the Crystal City, the Emerald City, you know?
And they were all about us, about helping us. Well, we should never have this kind of technology, and yet we did. But why was Hitler clamoring for that? Why were there things with the swastika on it? The crazy thing is, this general said that he felt like he had been there for days. And when he got back in his plane and was able to make radio contact, it had only been 3 hours.
Right. Yeah, time was not the same there.
Nothing seemed to be the same. And immediately after that happened, they cut that mission, the government cut that mission short, and everybody came home. The submarine, the battleships, the planes, the whole thing.
It's gone.
Why would you do that? They didn't test one article of equipment.
No, because they ended up not being down there for very long. This happened very quickly, like at the beginning of this mission.
So we said, okay, why would Hitler be going if they were all for helping humanity, why would Hitler be on the quest? Because he was into the occult. He was dealing with the fallen realm. He was talking with them. How did he know where to find them? Because they told him. They said they were going to help us, but at the same time, they said they would give us the information later.
Yeah, they're going to take us back, but then later on, they would help us move forward.
If none of this happened, let me throw this at you. Why then, after this whole thing happened with Hitler, did we have Project
Paperclip?
Project Paperclip was where we brought 51 scientists from Germany who was working on all of these things, and I would argue stuck them in Area 51, which would be a good cover where they didn't want anyone going there.
51 scientists, Area 51, look at that.
Ooh, you're good. I never even saw that before. Wow. So basically all we did was, Hitler was such a bad person, which he was, but we just took all of his stuff he'd been doing, took it up from there and brought it right down here and
said maybe we can handle it better.
Yeah. He was looking, as I said, for a way to win the war, and he thought if he could just
harness
whatever this talisman, this power from this Aryan group, that would be the ticket. But it got more than that. A lot of the things that he did had to do with human alterations.
Oh, absolutely.
He was the first cutting edge working on DNA, working to create whatever this race was down in Antarctica and bring it to the surface because they had more power, they had more knowledge, they had more. Well, so what are we dealing with right here?
It's the seed war all over again. It's just a continuation, I should say, of this seed war, changing our likeness to Christ.
So when we looked at with the portals and the stargates, and we saw how Aleister Crowley opened up the first portal and brought in Lamb, which looked like the alien gray. So in 1947, we had the two gentlemen that opened up the same portal trying to bring in the Babylon spirit. You can just see how we have had such a huge amount of medical breakthroughs, scientific breakthroughs, space age technology, all this stuff that had never even been thought of before, boom, happened right at about this time, and this was all the year before when
Israel became a nation.
My question to you is, if Hitler was looking for the superior race, if he was just looking for power to win the war, why did it have anything to do with the Jews? If there was no spiritual connection to this whatsoever, if it was all about world domination, because when you think about Alexander the Great, when he thought he was trying to conquer the world, he wasn't eradicating the Jews.
No. Yeah, it has to have a spiritual component, because Hitler talked about wanting world domination, but what did he do? He tried to exterminate the Jews.
And that's really at the heart
of all of it.
What he was getting at. So while this may really seem way out there, and I get it, oh my gosh, we have listened to a lot of things that you have to sift through, but there actually was a lot of inner workings from the government, stuff that has come out, eyewitnesses, other reports coming from different angles.
And it matches so much of what we know and what's coming. It all fits into this bigger puzzle. It really does.
So think about right now. If you were to look at a military map of Antarctica today, I mean, the majority of the countries that have any money or any military have a station
down there.
Right there on Antarctica. Why? Why would we have that? Unless we're sharing information, keeping each other from information. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to have much of a tactical advantage.
Well, and you have a friend who works at both Area 51 and where?
Antarctica. Interesting connection. Yeah. Not saying there's a connection.
But and they can't talk about it. It's top secret.
Not a word.
So why would all of this have anything to do with cattle mutilations? There is no easy segue into
There
that.
isn't. There really isn't. But
The dots.
you have to laugh when you're talking about this stuff.
But the dots do all connect, and they're not really a far stretch at all. We have ranchers around the entire world that have lost cattle to the strange phenomena, and is there a connection between them?
Well, and other animals have been mutilated, but by far the most common and prevalent are cows. Their horses, dogs, goats, pigs have all been mutilated too, but why cows as the most common?
This is the disclaimer part. Now, the pictures that we will be displaying on here actually can be found. I mean, this was in newspaper articles. It's on YouTube documentaries. L.A. Marzulli has a whole video out. I mean, a lot of people have taken pictures of this and posted it because it is so out there.
It is.
What is a mutilation? Now, I know when I grew up and you heard of things like that, the first thing to explain it was
some sort of satanic ritual.
the only problem with that, these cows, what is the number one common denominator of all of them?
They're completely drained of blood.
So we're going to say that again. They are
Completely drained of blood.
not one drop is left.
And that's true of not only the animal itself, but the area around it. So let's dig into this a little bit more. So Chuck Zukowski was interested in UFOs, and he was studying those. And he started finding a lot of crossover between animal mutilations, cattle mutilations, and UFO encounters, that people were often experiencing, seeing orbs or balls of light or the discs or all sorts of different things around where mutilated animals would be found. And he started studying that in California, and then he moved to Colorado, and he studied it quite extensively there. So let's see kind of what he found out and what we know to be some of these other common denominators.
Well, as we said, the animals are drained of the blood first before they're even cut.
Which, if you want a little bit of comfort, they're not alive then when they're being cut up.
No, they noticed with every single one of these animals, they knew for a fact that they had been killed before anything was done to them. These cuts are precise. They're described as surgical precision, as if a laser had been used, but it's a cold laser.
Right.
As there is no evidence of any heat at all.
Because the tissue is not damaged at all around there, like it would be if there had been a heat laser cutting it.
They also noted that scavengers won't touch the carcass of the animals who have been mutilated. Now, I have watched and researched other ones that we will see maybe why they won't, but there have been times they set up cameras and everything on just regular cows that have died, and they wanted to see if scavengers would, if they could produce the same things that are being done to these other cows. And there were sometimes that the animals wouldn't even touch
Just a regular carcass.
a dead carcass. But with them, they still had all the blood, everything would start to disintegrate a little bit, and maggots would come in. That was the other common denominator. All of these other carcasses, these animals that came back, still had everything else intact. No parasites, no maggots, nothing would start to deteriorate that cow.
There is definitely something to that.
And when they put a radiation meter on it, or electromagnetic reader, it was going off the charts.
Yeah, there was something different with those carcasses, that the makeup of their energy, the energy coming from them, was not the way it was when they were still alive. So often they would have like an eye or an ear that was cut out missing, several cuts on their chest, often their rear end, their lungs, their hearts, their kidneys, multiple organs, including often reproductive organs, have been taken.
And the udder.
Yes. Yes.
In every case, if they took the reproductive organs, they took the udder as well.
And then often their tongues were missing.
Well, and in some of the other ones I watched, and this is not a North American thing.
Right.
There in Australia is huge. We saw it in British Columbia.
And then the biggest
South America, massive. All the different mutilations, even more so than almost in North America. But with each one of them, it was the eye, it was the tongue and part of the cheek.
Yeah.
And then there's a hole down here that goes up into the brain, which is very interesting.
It is.
Even if nothing else was done to him, that was done.
And and this is the other part, depending on the animal, there is a circle around the body, an impression almost, that's like 16 to 22 feet in diameter.
So like something is recessed.
Right, yes, there is like an indent, yes. But it's not like something drove it there, because what else did they find?
Well, there was no movement or disturbance of the ground leading up to the mutilated body. It just is there. Now, there have been some wondering, did they like drop the cow? Because sometimes their bones will just be busted up.
But other
a lot of times
they're not, yeah.
They just... Here's the other thing, too. And L.A. Marzulli, this is the one thing that just kept bugging him over and over and over, why he said there is definitely something nefarious with this. Because if they were to steal a cow and take it, and they were to do whatever they were going to with, would they, one, not either keep it, or two, put it somewhere totally different so you wouldn't even know that it was gone. Right. But they don't. They put it right back in the exact same place of where they took it. As if to say,
look what we can do,
and you can't do anything about it. There is that persona of fear.
Oh, 100%.
That they're trying to do. There have been several ranchers that get hit the hardest. And it's not the area. One would think, okay, well maybe it's that area. We talked about ley lines, we talked about longitudinal, latitude, except when this rancher moved,
the mutilations continued to go with him.
And not
at the whole place. So we said that there was this sort of crater, right around it, and then this circle. So they took soil samples from right around the animal and then compared it to soil samples like farther away outside that circle. And the solubility of the soil had changed. It was not the same. Now, a high current or a high strength of energy or an energy source would make the soil lose its solubility. So that obviously there was some sort of significant energy source present where the mutilated animal was placed. And Chuck Zukowski, he tried very hard to go in, not looking at what everybody else had done and found, but...
He doesn't. In fact, he said he won't even look at other people's paperwork or their findings or anything, because he doesn't want to go down the same rabbit hole or the same track they do.
He wants to follow whatever the evidence is.
Fresh eyes, starting all over from scratch every single time.
So he took samples from 3 different states, soil sample pairs from 3 different states where they had these animal mutilations. They got the same results. So it wasn't like, well, yeah, it happened here, but over there it was different. They all were the same. And there was twice the Earth's magnetic field coming from one of the cow heads of the mutilated animal. Some kind of energy beam, dare I say, takes that body up and then places it back down.
Twice the Earth's magnetic field.
That's a lot.
Nothing causes that we have, that I am aware of.
No.
That's known to man. Maybe.
Not while a cow's just hanging out in the field.
So we talked about this one rancher that it didn't matter even if he moved. His name is Tom Miller. He has had 16 mutilations. on his property. The first one was all the way back in 1996, within 50 yards of his house.
That would be very unsettling.
And he didn't even know about that one.
Right.
But he has seen lights in the skies. He's seen orbs. He's had something pass over him a couple of times at night and woke the next day and he couldn't walk. 12 people have died in car accidents on a 1-mile stretch of roads right by his property.
Okay.
Why are they bugging him?
I don't know. Makes you wonder.
The one thing that was not asked of Tom Miller is if he is a believer in Jesus Christ or not. He is not the type that we can tell that has been dabbling in anything.
Right.
He's just being traumatized and terrorized by these things.
Right.
They asked him on a scale of fear, where are you at? And he said, an 8.
That's pretty
Which
high.
I thought would be higher than that.
I'd be like, 11!
So what we've tried to do is compile weeded through all this stuff. And that's why it's taken a little longer to get another one out, because there's a lot of stuff. What is it that you really need to know out of all of this? It's mysterious, it's creepy, it's nasty.
It's gross.
But why?
Right.
Why? Why is this happening? What is the end game or the end result? So let me ask you, Kristen, what is the reason that they're using the majority of them as cows?
Well, interestingly enough, what I did not realize is that cow blood and human blood are actually very, very close. So bovine blood can be used in humans. So when IVF was first coming about, they were studying hemoglobin and bovine hemoglobin to use it as part of that process. But the medical industry, I think, had some concerns about what that would look like, and I think that people would maybe shy away from that. So they squelched it for a while, but it is still used even today. And I know, like, you can use a pig's valve and a heart and some of that, but apparently blood product between cows and humans is quite close. So when you think about the amount of blood that they are draining from all these animals,
and how much blood a cow would have as opposed to a human,
or
the volume that you
dog
get.
or a sheep, or some of the smaller animals that this has happened with.
And why would they be wanting the blood?
Well, now, again, I know we've said a lot of things that seem to be out there, but we're not the only ones saying it. There's people that have seen it, and we're going to dig into that more next week. But it links up with the fallen realm,
and why there are human abductions.
Right.
What are they trying to do?
They are needing these products to create a different kind of life, or to create body suits of sorts for the fallen realm to inhabit.
So the Nephilim, this goes back to Genesis chapter 6. We've talked about this a lot. It is the procreation of the fallen realm, the fallen angels, with the daughters of man that they were never supposed to do. And because of that union, there came about these Nephilim, which were the mighty men of old, and they were giants, but they were a hybrid. They were nasty. Mm-hmm. And the whole point was to disrupt the seed war, mm-hmm. right? We are made in the image of God. Right. So if they can change that and become half their image, mm-hmm. then it's one thing to get at God. However, if they can change the DNA, change the seed, then Christ could never come
right.
to redeem all of us.
Right.
But there was one man who was still pure, who was still a Talmud, mm-hmm. which would be like the sacrificial lamb that was pure, holy, unblemished,
right.
perfect. And that was
Noah
and his sons. Hence why he and his sons, his family, were saved and started all over again. During the flood, those Nephilim drowned, mm-hmm. and since they were not created by God, they did not have souls that could be judged
right.
in that way. And so they became disembodied spirits that have been wandering and roaming around ever since. And they are looking for a way
To come back.
but they need a skin suit, so to speak, to do it. Why would Satan be creating all of these?
Because he needs an army when the time comes for the big battle at the end.
If you know your scriptures and you have read Revelation, that is exactly what's going on. He is trying to create an army. And he wants to take down the human race. That has been his plot from the very, very beginning.
Right.
This has nothing to do with UFOs. It has nothing to do with aliens. It is a seed war. It is a way to try to exterminate humans, but that's not going to happen because we have been given the scriptures. We know what is to happen.
Right.
But the cool thing is, when we've accepted Christ as our Lord and Savior, we're not going to have to be a part
of any of that
part.
Just to touch on kind of the darkest part of this, and then we'll get into the rest of it next time. There have been some cases of human mutilation that match these cattle mutilations in Canada and in Pennsylvania, but they never went anywhere. Only local law enforcement knew about it.
Well, because then it's considered a homicide.
Right, it's an active case.
Where with animals, it's animal cruelty, which it should, but the law enforcement...
Because they can't find anyone. They can't find anyone to prosecute. So in Canada, there was a car on the side of the road with a woman inside. A Mountie, stopped and saw her and found her.
Here's the thing. He knocked on the window, and she was unresponsive. She was leaning against the steering wheel. He gets the car door open. She's fully clothed. He thinks she's just maybe had a heart attack or she's unconscious. He calls 911. When they come to get her and they open up her shirt, what?
They discover that she had been mutilated, just like the cows.
Her heart was gone. But it was done surgically. No blood. Right. Not even a speck of blood on her shirt. They had no clue. This was not by satanic ritual.
No, it was not by... no human could do this. No.
And not... I've had 17 surgeries. And even with all the stuff that they have in modern technology today, I can guarantee you that there's a little blood that happens with every single one of them.
Right.
Not a speck. We don't say this to scare you. We just say this for you to be informed, because that is the entire point. We already know how the news media works as it is. They run with stories, they run with ticker tape leads, and it's not just on one station, it's on every station. It's in the newspapers, it's in the magazines. I saw a headline that really made me frustrated out of our local little town paper. But they got it from the Omaha World Herald, who got it from the New York Times. They're all just running the same articles. Mm-hmm. It is really easy to deceive the masses. If you were only given so much information, only the information they want you to know, the information that they want you to have, the emotions that they can invoke, the way that they can steer your thought process. And as we talked about last week with Superman and Supergirl and the indoctrination that was even going on just in a stupid DC comic series.
Right.
Yet changes the thoughts and the thought process of people.
And especially if children are watching that or being exposed to that, it changes the way their brain develops. It changes the way their worldview is. And there's plenty of research on this in the psychology and sociology fields. Plenty. This is not like us just, using a scare tactic. No, well-researched, well-defined. That kind of stuff changes the way we think and view the world in a really real way.
Next week, we're going to get into the human abductions. The reason why we're doing this is because there are factual medical examinations for people. Things have happened, and it's not just that, but for some it's the mental trauma the PTSD. Here's the thing though too. How do we wrestle with this on a spiritual level? We have a couple different things, and we'll get into this more next time, but I want you to be thinking about this through the week. You'll have one camp that says, well, if you just claim the name of Jesus and if you have accepted Christ, none of this will ever happen to you. Except what happens to those who have, and they still get abducted. There's the next camp of the ones who were conscious enough while they were being abducted that didn't name and claim the name of Jesus Christ, that were left alone. But then there were those that were taken in the middle of the night that didn't even know it.
Until down the road or they came back.
They didn't have the chance.
Right.
And they were Christian. There are a lot of things that we don't know. There are a lot of things that are not so cut and dried and so black and white.
Right.
But the big deception is coming, and that's what we're getting at. Jesus said that even the elect would be deceived. We've seen the reports from many pastors, from the Pope, from top officials all around, already talking about welcoming our
space brothers and sisters. Be prepared, it's coming. And we do not want you to be in the dark or to be deceived.
So we're glad you tuned in. We tried to keep it kind of short. Like I said, there are hours and hours and hours of documentation and footage and video that if you're interested in this, we encourage you to go watch it, look it up. Don't just take our word for it. In fact, L.A. Marzulli has some really good stuff out there. He's got a lot of DVDs, and it is all from Christian perspective. Skywatch TV has quite a bit too. There are just many outlets out there that come from a biblical view instead of an otherworldly view.
So as always, what you do with this information is up to you. But you can't say, we didn't tell you.
So until next time,
live long and prosper.